I-324 Online. This recorded video will serve as a sort of precursor to our Sunday Collaborate, which will be on the element of spectacle, or as we'll refer to it, theatricality. These are the 6 elements of drama, or the Aristotelian elements of tragedy, or Aristotle's elements of tragedy. I'll always use the language plot and character, but I'll often refer to thought as theme, diction as language, music as rhythm, and spectacle again as theatricality. Now we're going to use these 6 elements as tools to dig down into the play. They are only useful in as much as they're useful. Like any tool, we don't use a particular tool if it's the wrong tool for the job. There's nothing here that I need you to memorize and regurgitate. I want you to just have a lot of options as you're thinking about what to say about these plays in the discussion board, about how you can comment on these plays during a Collaborate discussion. We're creating options here. We're creating starting points for our own creative divergent analysis, because after all, these aren't the theater. None of this is the theater. They're lights in the dark of the theater to help us find the play. You'll find moments of theatricality in the text, but you'll also invent moments of theatricality in your analysis or in response to your analysis. Theatrical convention can be found directly in the text. The playwright might suggest something specific in his foreword or in his notes, but I'm more interested in your projected theatrical convention, because we're always reading these plays not like we're in an English class, but like we're in a theater class with the presumption of a production. So I'm going to run through plot, character, theme, language, and musical rhythm today so that I can leave the rest of our time in the Collaborate on Sunday for spectacle or theatricality. So let's begin with plot. First great theatrical age, the Greek, starts about 500 years before the Common Era. Aristotle, one of the more well-known Greek philosophers, wrote the Poetics, which is the first tome on the dramatic arts, first real codified book on the dramatic arts. At the very bottom of the screen here, you can see Aristotle's idea concerning plot structure: protasis, epistasis, katastasis, simple 3-part storytelling. The world is as it is, it's in status quo, it's in stasis, something happens, that something creates a problem which tends to get worse and worse until there's some kind of reversal, and then it moves towards resolving. Something happens, that thing stops happening, and then we're in a new stasis. Move forward in time, and Horace was a Roman, divided that 3-part structure into 5 parts, or 5 acts, but it's the same essential idea. You can see here this basic plot structure laid over some really familiar stories. The beginning is expository. We learn about this world in stasis. The pigs, 3 little pigs, live with their mom and everything's fine. That's the world we're living in. But then something happens. There is an incident that changes that stasis, right? That incident is the pigs leave home. The pigs build these various homes that get destroyed by the wolf. We now have an antagonist and a problem. That problem gets more and more severe until the 3rd pig builds a house that is survivable, and resolution. They live happily ever after, hopefully having learned some kind of lesson. This is not my image, by the way. I took this off the internet. It isn't until the 19th century that we see, along with the dawn of realism, with playwrights like Ibsen and Chekhov and Shaw, that we see what was called the Freytag pyramid. Now, you may not know all of this terminology: exposition, inciting incident, complication, crisis, climax, reversal, denouement. None of that may be familiar to you, or if you're a theater major, it may be. But that shape, that basic triangle, is something familiar. And if you Google shape of story, story structure, or plot, it is the first image you'll get on an image search. It is the Freytag pyramid. Freytag was a German critic And this really didn't come into being, this way of thinking about plot, until the 19th century. Shortly thereafter, Eugene Scribe described the well-made play, which again is incredibly structured. Ironically, Ibsen, who was a realist, one of the first realists, utilized this really rigidly structured plot description for some of his most well-known plays. Beginning with simple protasis, epistasis, catastasis, or beginning, middle, end, or a 5-act structure, or the Freytag pyramid, or the well-made play, we have a very clear idea of what story looks like. World instasis, inciting incident, problem, climax, resolution. We look for that in every story we read, whether it's a novel, a play, or even a television show or a movie. This is the way we understand story. I want to watch a short lecture from Kurt Vonnegut, who is an American author. You probably read Slaughterhouse-Five in high school, Cat's Cradle, Breakfast of Champions. He's a sort of dark, satirical, very well-known American novelist, or was. He also had a ton of critical work and essays and lectures, and this is really short and relatively funny. So let's take a quick look.
Well, there's no reason why the simple shapes of story can't be fed into computers. They have beautiful shapes. This is the GI axis, good fortune, ill fortune. Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now, this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now, this is an exercise in relativity, really. The shape of the curves is what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average. Is why get a depressing person? We'll start the whole thing. We call this story Man in Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's a good way to remember. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it. All right, not copyrighted. Another story, also a beautiful curve and easily fed into a computer, called Boy Gets Girl, but it needn't be that. Just a way to remember it. Start on an average day, average person, not expecting anything to happen a day like any other. Find something wonderful, just loved it. Oh, God damn it. Got it back again.
There you have every rom-com you've ever seen.
Now, these are beautiful curves, and this gets a little complicated. Computers can now play chess, so I don't know why they can't digest this very difficult curve I'm going to draw for you now. And it so happens that this is the most popular story in our civilization, Western civilization. As we love to hear this story, every time it's retold, somebody makes another $1 million. You're welcome to do it. Now, surprisingly enough, I've said it's depressing. You know, people don't like stories about below average days and people. But we're going to start way down here. Worse than that, who is so low? It's a little girl. What's happened? Her mother has died. Her father has remarried a vile-tempered, ugly woman with two nasty daughters, big daughters. You've heard it. See? Anyway, there's a party at the palace that night. She can't go. She has to help everybody else get ready. She has to stay home. Now, does she sink lower? No. She's a staunch little girl, and she has had the maximum whack from fate, which is the loss of her mother. She can't go any lower than that. Okay, so the fairy godmother comes. Gives her shoes, gives her stocking, gives her mascara. Gives her means of transportation. Goes to the party. Dances with the prince, has a swell time. Boring, 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 boring. Now, there's a slight inclination to that line as I've drawn it because it takes perhaps 20 seconds, 30 seconds for a grandfather clock to strike 12. Does she wind up at the same level? Of course not. She will remember that dance for the rest of her life. Now, she poops along on this level till the prince comes to shoe fits. She achieves off-scale happiness.
My point here, with regards to plot, I'm not interested in your showing me that you can remember the distinction between Aristotle and Horace and Freytag and Scribe. Rather, I'm interested in those places where the plays diverge from your immediate knee-jerk understanding of structure. That's where you're going to find those great analytical ideas. Where are these plays different? Where do they subvert your expectations about plot and structure? Are the plays chronological? Do the events in the plays occur in time, or do they occur achronologically? Are they linear or nonlinear? Do they occur out of time, out of order? Ask yourself, what is distinct or different about the way plot progresses in this particular piece of literature? Is the story interrupted by structural elements or motifs, as it is in the shape of things with all of the confessions? Does the story have no clear resolution at the end? As with the goat, does it leave you desperate for something else? Does it leave you needing an answer to a question that never gets answered, as is the case in Shanley's Doubt? What is different about the plot, about the story, about the structure, the dramatic structure of these plays? You don't need to know specifically how to categorize that plot or that structure in order to answer this question, because it's about the distinction between your preconceived notions about story and the way this particular story unfolds. So look for those aspects of plot or story that excite you. And then importantly, like everything else, tell me what they mean, what they imply about our world, about the central theme of this play in our world, and so on. On to character. So a few different ways I want you to think about character, and the first couple are as an actor. If you were playing this character, if you were playing Adam or you were playing Evelyn, what would be important to you? These are the guideposts from Michael Shirtleff's book Audition, which is a book that a lot of actors use to understand audition monologues. First of all, the first guidepost is relationships. So what are the primary relationships in the characters' lives? Know what the facts of those relationships are. Think about how they met, how they relate to one another, and also, what is the emotional context of those relationships? How do they feel about one another, or how do they make one another feel? Also consider, what is that central conflict between the antagonist and the protagonist? What are they fighting for? What are the things that they want to get? If we know what a character's objectives are, it makes it a lot easier to understand their behavior. And as critics, it makes it a lot easier for us to compare that behavior to real people in the world and to make a decision about, again, what that means. Skipping down to guidepost 4, these don't all apply to this kind of play analysis. Humor. Where is the irony or the self-awareness in the character? Don't think of humor always as funny jokes, but rather consider where do the characters find themselves ridiculous? Where are those moments where the characters are self-aware? There's always something to be learned there, to be gleaned about the character, their position in the play, in the story, and what that means to us, what it means to play and what it means to us or our audience. Opposites. Every fault or attribute has an opposite. So find the opposites in these characters. There's no love without a little bit of hate. There's no courage without a little bit of fear. So as you begin to think about the characters archetypically, let's say you feel like Adam may be a little dim-witted, you feel like Evelyn may be overly manipulative, find the place where Evelyn is supportive and those places where Adam is controlling. Analyze the characters as if they were real human beings. Communication and competition. Every bit of dialogue is a communication and is a competition, and you should think about it that way. Think about dialogue like a tennis match, hitting balls back and forth in a tennis court. Both characters want something. Both characters believe that their ideas are correct and are trying to convince the other character that their ideas are correct. So consider that when reading dialogue or when you go back and analyze the dialogue. What are the major events for the characters? Events are anytime something happens that changes the world in which the characters find themselves. So it could be something as simple as the entrance of a new character, or something as severe as a death or the dissolution of a relationship. But find those events. It will help you to understand who these people are and how they behave. Of course, place is incredibly important. Understand the environment in which the play takes place. We all play different roles in different environments, so understand or ask yourself, when are the characters their true self? When are they role-playing? And feel free to make stuff up. Every search for meaning begins with the first I, which is investigation, moves through the second I, which is inference, made on that investigation, and the third I is imagination. We make things up based on the first two. I am as interested, if not more, on those mysterious and secret character attributes that you see but aren't necessarily in the text. When you think about character analysis from an actor perspective, it can be useful to consider the event analysis language of circles of circumstance. So every character we can look at in terms of these three circles. The first is the large circle. These are things we cannot change about ourselves, like gender or nationality or the era in which we grew up, our race, and etc. The second is the middle circle of circumstance. Those are discernible periods of time, finite moments that affect the character. These are the given circumstances of their life. So what are their college years like? What was their childhood like? Did they grow up with money? Did they grow up in a very religious household with strict parents? Or did they grow up in a very permissive household? And how is that working on them now? How does that affect their behavior in the now? And then finally, the small circle of circumstance. That's the immediate moment in the play where we consider what is the character's objective, what do they want in this moment, and how does that need fulfill what they want in life. Every character has what's called a super objective, which is their reason for being, the reason that they get out of bed in the morning. My super objective has to do with being a good provider, taking care of my family, being a good husband and a good dad. Everything I do, from brushing my teeth in the morning to teaching to acting, everything I do feeds that super objective. Even when I'm doing something that's seemingly self-serving, I'm keeping myself in an emotionally healthy place where I can be a good provider, a good husband, a good father, and so on. So all of my immediate objectives from the small circle of circumstance are affected by that middle circle and that large circle, the given circumstances of my past, and they all feed that super objective, that reason for being, that thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. So what is the character's super objective, the main characters, and how does that alter your understanding of the play? Finally, we can look at characters in terms of their type. Are they stock characters, as we might see in the Commedia dell'arte? Are they character types? Can you think of some character types? And I want you to think in really general contemporary language here. You know, is it the leading man type? Is it the hero type? Is it the ingenue? Is your character like a best friend? These are all types that tell us something about the role of the character within the story, and in fact tend to fit in with even real, deep-shaded human beings. Just because a character can be classified in terms of temperament or archetype or even stock character doesn't mean that they aren't real and human. We can all be classified in this way. I like the Greek temperaments, which are based on Greek gods. So if you're unfamiliar, Epimetheus is the husband of Pandora. Pandora opened the box and let all of the evils out, and he stuck by her. He was loyal. So the Epimethean temperament is the guardian or the caregiver, puts others before him or herself. Dionysius is the god of wine and revelry and theater. It is our hedonistic side, our creative side, our inner artisan. The Apollonian temperament is the idealist. It is the temperament in which we have real beliefs and we live by those beliefs. John McCain recently passed away, and if you watched his funeral, everyone spoke about his Apollonian temperament, that he lived by his beliefs, he was honest, he was loyal, etc. Finally, the rationalist temperament is the Promethean temperament. Prometheus brought fire to humanity. It is the temperament that is not led by emotion as much as what can be seen, what can be objectively understood. The Promethean temperament has trouble with empathy, whereas the Epimethean temperament perhaps has too much empathy. So think of these contrasts of temperament. How do they behave? What temperament is Evelyn? Is she Dionysian? Is she Promethean? I think there's a good argument for either one. And it's not about labeling, and that's the end. It is how, in the discussion of is she Dionysian or is she Promethean, what that reveals to us, what it allows us to consider, and how those considerations lead to the potential for theatrical convention and a creative presumption of the production. There is, of course, the protagonist and the antagonist, the pro side or the anti side of the struggle or the conflict, if we're thinking about it in terms of etymology. There's the deuteragonist, which is the best friend, the sidekick. This is a character that we are all familiar with from romantic comedies. And the first play that you're reading is somewhat of a romantic comedy. It feels very cinematic in that way. It does have a best friend, a sidekick character. There's the love interest. There's the sage or the mentor, the guide, right? The Jungian archetypes are always useful. The innocent, wholesome, pure, forgiving, trusting. You know this character. You've seen it many times. The explorer, independent, values freedom, a seeker, adventurous. Again, you know these characters. They're in your bones. So go back to these lists and ask yourself, what archetype is this character? The sage, a thinker, a philosopher. a guru, the hero, a warrior, the outlaw, the rebellious character, the countercultural character, the magician, a shaman, a healer, an almost magic character, a catalyst for change. The regular guy, gal, or the orphan. This represents you and I. In most plays, there is a character on stage that is the everyman. He is the audience on stage, that we can understand his actions. We know what his actions are because we empathize with them. He makes sense to us, which allows us to have an opinion about the characters around him or her. The lover, the jester, the clown, the caregiver, the creator, and the ruler. Look through these Jungian archetypes and ask yourself where the characters fit in. You can see the overlap with these 4 Greek temperaments, which are kind of a distillation of these Jungian archetypes, with contemporary character types, and this longer, more academic list. So take a look at these and ask yourself these questions about the characters. There'll never be some requisite archetype that you have to name. It's never going to be necessary that you say exactly what archetype Martin from Albie's The Goat represents. Rather, I think if you read through these, when you're thinking about Martin and asking yourself, which one is he? Is he the regular guy? Or is he a creator because he's an architect? What is he? It may or may not give you something finite to say, but it'll open up a new area of investigation so that you can find your own creative, divergent ideas about that character. Again, there is no one way to think about who these characters are and how they behave. We can look at it like an actor. What is their past? What is their present? What is their future? How does their past work on them, even in the small circle of circumstance? Because my past is working on me all the time. There are events from my past which I never forget, which are still working on me. My relationship with my parents and my family is always working on me. So we can think about these characters in that regard. We can think about them as actors think about characters. We can think about them in terms of classification. Are they a stock character? Are they a clear character type? We can look at the Greek temperaments, and we can think about them in the context of these archetypes. On to diction or language. So it seems pretty obvious the role of language, but when we think about what we can do to come up with with specific and clear ideas about the language in the text, it's useful to begin with just a list of what the language does that may be off the beaten path in terms of our understanding. First of all, language colors the overall style of the play. The way characters speak not only defines who they are, but it defines the world that they live in. You'll find that to be true in every play that we read. The vernacular, the parlance of the characters varies wildly across these plays. So language helps to tell us about the world of the play. It also delineates character, not just in terms of individual character attributes, but social status, hierarchy. If you consider Shakespeare, Shakespearean characters use thou and thine when they're speaking to someone of a lower status, and you and yours when they're speaking to someone of a higher status. So language can reveal a social status, reveal social masks, reveal game and role-playing. Language helps to establish the world of the play. Obviously, where are we? And how does language change depending on where we are? Language supports or suggests motif. Often we can discover motifs which are repeated structural elements within the play that help to support theme. often we can discover these motifs by looking at the language for distinct contrasts that come up over and over again, for repeated phrases, and for the way language evolves through the play. So when you're reading a play like Albie's the Goat and you see, the language in the first scene, the first act, is incredibly droll and witty and humorous. And in the second, it's incredibly tragic. So that evolution, that change of the kind of language, well, it says something about the play's structure, right? It allows us to say something about plot. But more importantly, it suggests something. I don't know what that suggestion is to you, but ask yourself, what does that suggest? Language, of course, supports theme, reveals or creates musicality. After all, the rhythm of spoken English, whether it is in iambic pentameter or in verse or otherwise, not only carries attitude, but it also carries meaning, right? Our rhythm, the musicality, the intonation of language helps to suggest meaning. Language directs focus. Remember, in the theater, we have to consider directed focus all the time. If we're behind a camera, the audience is forced to look exactly where we want them to look. Excuse me. In the theater, the audience can choose to look anywhere they want. So language helps to direct their focus where we want them to pay attention. And if we look at the absurdist, for example, playwrights like Ionesco or Genet, or my favorite, Sam Beckett, or even Albee, who we're going to read this year, who's sometimes considered an absurdist, part of what they were interested in was discussing the uselessness of language or the futility of language, and they did that through language. So their language was often seemingly nonsensical. Why? When you note that characters are just lobbing words back and forth and they don't seem to mean anything, don't just roll your eyes, but ask yourself why. What does it say? Is that what we do? Could it be that we're just lobbing social ballast back and forth in our own lives? Things like, what's up? Nothing. Or, how are you? Fine. What are you doing? Nothing. They're meaningless. So language can be used as a kind of meta-criticism or something meta-theatrical. Again, we're going to look at that prefix meta in here as meaning in reference to or about. In other words, self-referential. So meta-theater is theater about theater, or theater that understands that it is itself theater, that references itself as a play. And finally, the use or the understanding of literary devices. Things like metaphor. If we look at the etymology there, meta-ferrying is to transfer meaning, to ferry meaning, to take one meaning and transfer it to another meaning. So where are the metaphors in the play? We can often begin with the play's title. It provides foreshadowing, it provides symbolism, it often provides metaphor. The play's title tends to tell us what the play is about, the shape of things. We can look at symbolism. What in the shape of things is a clear symbol? A symbol being an object that represents something else. So think about Adam's old jacket. What does that symbolize? Foreshadowing, both in the title and in the things that characters say. Allusion, with an A, or the reference to outside works or outside events. That happens all the time in the literary arts, and it will happen several times this semester. As a matter of fact, In the Blood is a very clear allusion to a novel most of you probably read in high school. Look for different kinds of irony, verbal irony, situational situational irony, dramatic irony. Verbal being the difference between the implied meaning and the literal meaning. Situational being a difference between the expected and the planned outcome. That's like kind of the cosmic sort of irony, or the Alanis Morissette brand. And finally, dramatic irony, which is disparity of awareness, when the audience knows something that a character on stage doesn't. We can see them behaving in a way that we know is completely wrong because we have information that they don't. Look for paradoxes in the language, places where two things that seemingly cannot exist together do, or oxymorons. Think about hyperbolic speech or platitudes. When characters are overly exaggerative, what does it reveal, that language? This semester, there are several plays that utilize the convention of the flashback. This is a deeply theatrical convention. It's one that we're used to and that feels almost realistic to us, but this is not the way we observe people remembering things in our everyday lives. If I think back to an event from my past, you don't see that event play out on stage. I know that sort of seems like it goes without saying, but it doesn't. It is a non-realistic convention, the flashback. So look for those throughout the semester and ask yourself how they work, what they say. Again, motifs, repeated structural elements. A good way to understand motif is to think about leitmotif in music. It's a little ditty that helps us to understand a character or a location. We'll talk about that more in music, but there are a number of character motifs or tunes that you could come up with yourself right now. The most obvious is dun 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 dun. We hear that, we instantly think Darth Vader, and not just him and his mask, but also his relationship with his son, his struggle throughout his life. It's all encapsulated in that song, and that's what a motif does. It represents something through a repeated structural element. Also look for allegory. There's not too much moralizing that'll happen in the plays that we're reading, but doubt is called doubt a parable. So there is allegory, and there is moralistic storytelling in these plays, and you should look for them. All of these are tools like everything else. Let's say you've written 50 words in a discussion board for one of the plays, and you're like, I just can't think of anything else. Close your eyes and point at this list. Pick one, and then go find it somewhere, and then tell me what it means that you found it. I noticed that there's a lot of situational irony. Here's what I think that means in the context of this play thematically, in the context of its plot. Here's what it means about the world in which we live. Music or rhythm. So there are structural musical elements in the theater. You can consider the Greeks. They have the chorus, which chanted poetry or hymns and served to offer advice to the central characters, occasionally played crowds on stage. But music was a part of the chorus's role on the stage. So there are structural musical elements. There's underscore and sound design. We can't forget that when we put plays on the stage, or when we shoot a movie, in the editing process, we often lay music over the action so as to tell the audience how to feel or what they're feeling. You're not going to see a whole lot on underscore in the notes in the script. You'll see a little bit of it, but not a whole lot. This allows for you to make really creative decisions about how music might be used. You just have to be able to tell me why. And that is a creative act. Your reasoning can't be wrong as long as you have that reasoning. And you're beginning to use our shared tool set and our shared vocabulary here. One of the teachers who taught in the Stanislavski technique from Russia, by the name of Boleslavsky, wrote a book called The First Six Lessons, and the sixth lesson is on rhythm. He says that the Mr. What is happening is the action, and the how that action is happening is the rhythm. That rhythm is the orderly, measurable changes of all the different elements comprised in a work of art. So look at all of the elements, right? Plot, character, theme, language, theatricality, the way those elements change over time, and the degree to which they change, to which they alter, describes the rhythm of the play overall. That rhythm can be looked at in terms of the shape of the plot, but also in terms of the changes as that plot progresses. Rhythm also reveals characters, not just of human beings, but of places. Think about somewhere like New York City. You start off at ground level, has a very particular rhythm with all the people walking by you, the hubbub of the street. You go up to the top of the Empire State Building, and the rhythm shifts dramatically as you look down to the little ant world below you. We also might consider poetic devices and meter. So how does rhythm within the language, how does the meter of the language add meaning to theme? How does it reveal important messages in the play? We don't have to just consider Shakespeare, which was either in iambic pentameter or prose, but we can look to these contemporary plays and ask ourselves, hey, is there anything happening that is poetic in a play like In the Blood? What is a convention like the rest in the Blood suggest about the play's overall rhythm, and how can I use that suggestion to add meaning to my presumed production? And finally, leitmotif, which we've already discussed. Theme. So we use all of these elements, this basic analysis, to reveal thematic territories, these big abstract ideas that tell us what the play is about. We relate them to the world of the audience, which is our world. We relate them to current events, and we express them as either a specific categorical idea, one word, revenge, love, art, empathy, or we use them to create a very specific, articulative, I'm going to say nominative statement that describes the meaning of the play. I like that word nominative. I don't care so much about the grammatical aspect. Sure, a good nominative statement should be in the nominative voice, but more importantly, it implies that you nominate that central theme. That nominative statement describes your nominated central theme, and it should be one that stands up to this test. You can tell a group of people, I'm going to suggest something that'll change the way you live your life. And that thing is, insert your statement. Look, you can't say, I'm going to tell you something that's going to change the way you think about the world and live your life. And that thing is love. And that thing is revenge. That doesn't mean that those categoricals, that those big categories or abstracts aren't useful. As you read The Shape of Things, I want you to think about listing what those categoricals are, right? The nature of art, the nature of love, the nature of ethics and morality, and so on and so forth. But then I want you to really think about the meaning of the play and how you can give me in one sentence, one statement that describes the meaning of the play. So my statement for The Shape of Things is, in the contemporary world, our ability to empathize is damaged by all of the screens that separate us from other people. And I could tell you where I get that from in the play. It's not obvious at all, and that wouldn't be your analysis because it's something I made up. But it's my contention that the poppy, sort of hyper-contemporary language in the play and all of the textual overlap, the way the characters interrupt one another, suggests a landscape that's super modern, which to me suggests that they have phones in their hands, that things might be digital projections, etc. And that all of that puts us in the contemporary world, the world of screen mediation, where we're constantly communicating to each other through screens, which does allow us to use a lot less empathy. You can see this in YouTube video comments, right? It can be like a little kitten running in a field, and the comments are all, screw that bitch. You know, it's strange, but we lose our potential for empathy when we don't have to face that person. So you can hear in that sentence, though, I could say to an audience, hey, I'm going to tell you something that's going to change the way you think about the world. And that thing is, in the screen-mediated world, we're losing our ability to empathize with other human beings. That is a tight, descriptive, nominative statement that describes the meaning of the play. So for theme, I want you to think about those categoricals, a list of those big abstracts, but also think about what your central theme is. We also sometimes refer to this as a director's matrix. What's the lens through which all of the elements are reflected or refracted? How does the play get interpreted? Often that is through some kind of central theme. You'll articulate that theme through this nominative statement, and we'll work on these together. Okay, and that takes us to our Sunday Collaborate. Just to review, this slideshow and all of the information contained herein will be available to you throughout the semester. If you're ever lost after reading a play, as I suggested on our first Collaborate, you read the play, write down your initial thoughts, write down your first reaction, and then if you're unsure where to go next, well, what do I'm thinking about this play, I'm analyzing this play, what does that mean? Ask yourself, well, what can I say that is meaningful to me about each of these elements? What can I say about the plot structure? Well, let me think about the shape of things. Well, I can see that it takes place in a lot of different locations, right? There's like 12 different locations in there or something, or 14. It pops from one place to another place to another place to another place to another place, which gives the play a sort of cinematic feel. It sort of adds to the fact that the play feels like a romantic comedy. So that's a comment I could make about the plot, about the shape of the story when reading The Shape of Things. What could I say about the characters? And to do that, you know, I might want to think about archetypes. I might want to think about character types. I might want to think about the guideposts, about relationship, or about what mysteries do I see? What hidden, inexplicable, or ineffable facts about these characters can I uncover if I consider them? So move through these elements, asking yourself, how can these assist me in saying something about the play? You're saying something intelligent and meaningful about these elements, not because they jump out at you, not because you have a burning desire to do so, but rather because you're required to write about the play. I think that you'll find, as you dig down into these plays, utilizing plot, character, theme, language, and rhythm as guides, as tools to brush the dust off and really dig down into the literature, you'll find it very easy to make the presumption of production, to use those first 5 elements to create spectacle or theatricality, which is what we'll cover in our Sunday Collaborate.